you for coming and listening to me talk about some speech-to-text. I'm really, really excited, and my heart rate is apparently through the roof according to my watch, so bear with me if I start talking way too fast. But to start off with some introductions, apart from what Lars has already done for me, my name is Akanksha, as he did introduce correctly. I think there was a few other bits that were correct, but I am based in Melbourne. I am a data consultant. I've been working in consulting for the last couple of years here, and I'm also a Microsoft AI MVP. So I talk a lot about accessible AI and how we can all get a bit involved into using some models for ourselves. That is a very flamboyantly Irish photo of me, which reminds me that I am Irish and I can talk really, really fast sometimes. So I'm trying to avoid that. But if it does get away from me, please bear with me. But without further ado, let's get started about what the agenda for the next 15-ish minutes is. We're going to build a speech-to-text model, and it's going to be transcribing a whole podcast. That is the aim of this. This is a little bit different than most of the talks today, because it's not really an enterprise solution. I kind of wanted to talk about a thing that I use in my personal life, because the whole idea of this is making things really, really accessible. So with that, let me talk about my very unbiased, shameless plug of my own podcast. But it's essentially talking about untraditional pathways into technology. I just talk to people, I'm nosy about their lives, and I'm like, please tell me more. And the whole problem with it that I realized was me trying to make it really accessible. Like, I've put it onto every platform out there, as easily findable as I can make it. But then I realized if anyone has any hearing impairments or disabilities associated to it, it's kind of useless. They can't actually allow or access it at all. So with that is where the whole speech-to-text came in. And there we go. The accessibility areas that I wanted to hit for this session altogether was I needed speech-to-text of the audio in the first place. What are we talking about? What are we actually saying? All of it written out for people who might want to just read it instead of listening to podcasts. Separation of speakers. So there's two people talking, usually me and the guest. I wanted to be able to actually highlight that there's two people talking, and I don't want to have to sit down and do it. The main purpose behind this is that this is a side hobby, very much on just kind of wherever I have free time, so it needed to be easy to do. And the minute I started looking into kind of enterprise solutions for this, where people have already built it, it got very expensive very quickly. And I think it was my dad, who is very much not a tech person, who was like, well, aren't you a data person? Can't you do this yourself? And I'm like, great point. I should be able to do this myself. So this is how it all came about. The tech stack that we will be looking at today and how I kind of made this whole thing work. I didn't build any of my own models. These were built by Azure Cognitive Services, which is where they've trained all these models, and I just ask of them to do what I want. So I want them to do speech-to-text on my content, and they go and do it for me. Where I'm actually coding and leveraging services is through Azure Machine Learning. I'm coding all of this in Python, and all of my data, which is the audio for the podcast, is stored on the blob storage. So with that, let's actually have a look at how all of it works. So the first things first, we need to actually create a speech service. So if you head on into your Azure portal and look for speech, this is a speech service that comes up. So basically, this is actually allowing you to buy the service that will give you all these models where you don't need to co-create any of them. And to set this up, it is a fairly straightforward process. Let me zoom in a bit for you. You assign it into a resource group so that when you want to delete everything you've created, you just nuke the whole thing, just pulls everything together. Give it a region, pick whichever one you feel like. Every region gives you one free tier. So if you want to keep using the free tiers, you're more than welcome to do so by changing different regions. But just be aware that the free region, I think, gives you about 5 hours of audio that you can transcribe on a monthly basis. So kind of hits the goal for most people at a very low level of usage. So if I gave this a name, let's say demo testing, that goes away. And then I choose my pricing tier, which is only standard because I've already used my free tier. But that is it. That is all I have to do to create my speech service. And all this is just doing is telling Microsoft I'm going to be using this, and they can bill me accordingly if I go over my usage. So it's all pay as you go. So let me just click out of this so I can show you when you hit click create, what this looks like. Looks kind of like this. Please, nobody steal my keys and services. But the main point here that I want to highlight is your keys and endpoints. So this is how you can actually connect to the service you've built. And that's essentially it. So that's where you've created it. Now I get to actually go talk to these models that Microsoft has in the back end. And I've done that using Python code. And this is a notebook that I built. This is going to get a little bit annoying because there's a lot of code on the screen. And I just want to highlight, you don't need any of it. All of this code, some of it I have customized for myself, but all of this is available freely online. None of this was something I was sitting there being a maverick, writing up anything kind of groundbreaking. So yeah, don't be scared by how much code there is. You are definitely more than capable of doing this yourself as well. So let's just start highlighting some of the bits that we need throughout this. The main thing I want to highlight is the speech SDK. So this is how you actually talk to the speech services. They've built a speech SDK. That's how you can communicate back and forth. So this has all the functions and everything. You can connect directly to it. So I've got to import that. And then I need to basically tell everything that I use, hey, this is the speech key, the one that I pointed out earlier, this one here. So please fill yours in accordingly. I was for once in my life, I didn't publicly announce my speech key, and then what region it's sitting in. So when you're actually using these, your code knows where to actually pull things correctly from. So let's have a look at what this actually looks like. So I have a test file. Let me play that test file. I'm hoping it'll play. Wait, we can't hear it.
To make sure that my
I sound very dead.
Interpreted properly and uploaded.
Okay, it's only 10 seconds.
Running this test to make sure that my .ua file can be interpreted properly and uploaded.
So it's a 10-second file where I'm basically just mumbling into the mic, and I kind of wanted to see if it'll pick it up. And that is what I've pulled in. So I'm basically telling the actual Python code and files and functions that, hey, this is my subscription, which is my speech key, and this is my region, this is where it's sitting. And then I tell it what my audio file is, which is my test file. And then I say, put those two things together and do some speech to text, please. I ask for it back, and this is the result it gives me back. Running this test to make sure that my .view big file can be seen. I was trying to say .wave, but I said that very badly, apparently, according to the mumbling, so that is what it picked up for me. And it's not far off, to be honest. And there's differences within the way you can access the code. So this is all mentioned in the docs and everything about the speech SDK itself. But that's just the first utterance. So this is where it kind of figured out, OK, you took a break here, and I think this is a chunk of words, so it stops there. If I wanted to do the whole file in one go, I need to basically tell it to keep going until there's an end. So the code changes a little bit, because I'm telling it there will be an end somewhere down the line. And then I get it to tell me exactly what it's doing every single step of the way. But you can see the results just here at the bottom, where the second utterance was interpreted properly and uploaded. So I'm like, OK, cool. As a quick test, this seems to be working. This is going well. So let's actually try this on kind of real-life context. So the trailer for the podcast was the first one I tried, because most of the podcast episodes are like 40 minutes upwards of an hour kind of length. So I'm like, let's not do it the whole thing very quickly. Let's try 2 minutes of audio, which led me to running it. And actually, it worked. And it was a little bit terrifying, because I still remember the first time I ran this about a year ago, it did not get my name right. There's days I can't spell my own name correctly. So the fact that this has now learned how to spell my name correctly is a bit scary. And I haven't done any custom work on this. This is just me running it again and again and again, and it's relearning things as it goes. The fact that it has a second K in there, most people don't remember that K, so it's kind of amazing to me. But it got my name right, and I was very, very happy at this stage. So just as a referral point, this is what this audio actually sounds like.
Hey everyone, my name is Akanksha Malik, and welcome to Pats Uncovered, the podcast. I am a data scientist working at a tech consulting here in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm also a Microsoft AI MVP.
So it's pretty on the dot, and I want to highlight the fact that it's got everything really grammatically correct. I haven't done any of that. It's been able to figure that out itself, so it basically does speech to text, it picks up all the different words, and then it also adds grammar into it and everything else you want added to. So that's kind of a nice little touch that it can add, which then kind of just preceded me into doing the whole file, and I keep going, and there's a lot of text and stuff here. But what I want to highlight is this little bit. So when I'm actually doing this, when it's a full audio podcast for 40 minutes, let's say, I'm not going to be manually uploading everything in one go. I'm going to put that in blob storage. And this is basically how I've connected it directly. So I've told it, hey, recordings are in this blob storage. Please go read them, do the transcription, and then go put them back here, please. So this is what that code is doing. Again, I haven't written any of this code. Most of this code has been recycled from the team that's actually built most of the speech services SDK. And the main bit to highlight here are the properties you can add. So the main part of my thing was I want to be able to do speech to text. I can do that now. And the other thing was being able to do identification of two speakers, because there's two people speaking, and I don't want to have to sit down and manually distribute everything out myself. So this is where that happens. So diarization is a technical term of being able to say, split the speakers out, identify individuals, and I just turn it on to true, and that is it. I can also mask any profanity if I wanted to. I don't think there's a lot of cursing in the podcast, but hey, I mean, that ability is also there, so you can feel free to turn it on if you'd like. And again, this is it, like you just run the code and it will give you the full code base. So after essentially the content that is sent back out once it's been translated into your blob storage is a JSON file. So this is kind of what it looks like. I've just basically extracted the JSON file and made it a little bit prettier, where I can actually just read the things I want to read and take out all the extra bits. But what I've been able to do is split the two speakers out. So this is a podcast with Rachel Dagg in it, and get the different context of who's speaking when and what they've spoken. And then I can take that and put that onto the website for the podcast and actually put the transcription there. So Chris Howard will be speaking at some stage later on today. She's been on the podcast, if you want to go listen to hers. But I ran the transcription on her episode and basically popped it up there. And she's now laughing. It's a really good episode, folks. It was very entertaining. But, I mean, the first sentence I apparently spoke was like me getting English back into my brain, which is a very normal thing for me to do, not being able to speak when I start talking. But this has just made my life a little bit easier. The next steps for me is basically automating the whole process. At the moment, it's still me running the notebook and then populating things into the websites at the moment, a little bit manually. But it's going pretty well. I don't have to worry too much about it. It's essentially free for me to do this because it's on the free tier. There's only 1 or 2 podcasts coming out every month, so that 5 hours covers me up pretty well. And I just copy paste and pop it up onto the website. And makes it a lot more accessible for people who really don't want to listen to podcasts, which there's a fair few of them, and I don't fault them for it at all. But yeah, there's lots of things that we can kind of keep going from this. There's other services like key phrase extraction. So I could basically get that whole the blog, and extract all the key phrases and actually make a really summarized version of what was talked about in that podcast. So many different use cases, and the kind of highlight of this is there's a lot of daily use cases in your life, I'm sure, that you can implement this for yourselves. Go try it. It's really not as complicated as, look, I know there's a lot of code on the screen. That's just it spitting back results, not as much coding as you actually require. So with that, let me head back into my slide deck, because I think I have about a minute left, and I will leave everyone go for lunch. Or no, there's a panel, I think. But we hit all the different areas. I hope I made that clear. We were able to do some speech to text on the audio. There was separation of speakers. I was able to do that fairly quickly. And it was fairly easy to create in the sense of I just picked and pocked and just connected different pieces up together. So thank you for listening to me. That is a QR code to the podcast itself, if you feel like having a look at what me and Chris talked about, or all the other people who've been on guests on the podcast. Again, very shameless plugs, but feel free to join in. And if you have any questions, I'm going to be around later. I will probably have to get off the stage in a second, but thank you for listening.